It is Redacted's best kept secret. No one outside of the university knows that it exists. Its habits include terrorizing students and occasionally eating us. You're probably wondering why we would attend a school with its own personal monster, no matter how prestigious the school is. You might as well ask me why the sky is blue, or the grass green, or why everyone eventually grows old and dies. We just do. I can't explain why. Those of us who are still alive have never actually seen it, but we hear it shrieking late at night as we're desperately shuffling through books and cramming for our examinations, fighting over the coffee that someone braver than us snuck inside. And of course, we've all seen the bodies that it leaves for us. Our first year during Trinity term, it took Jennifer Carr and then spat her mangled body back out onto the grass in front of the cam, our main library. It had taken her body from the waist down, her intestines spilled out in messy loops, and the ragged edges of her torn skin fluttered in the wind. The cam is inarguably the most photographed building of Redacted University, and Redacted Square is the top place that tourists flock to. Possibly it hates tourists as much as the rest of us do. More likely, it wanted to make some kind of point about how it chooses to stay in the cam, but doesn't actually have to. Whatever its actual shape and appearance, it always sounds like a crying girl. Emphasis on sounds because it is most definitely not human. You don't even need to see it to know that. Although they would deny it if you asked. Redacted university administrators have documentation proving that it's been here since the late 1000s, leaving behind one body after another. Obviously, no human can live that long. 2 decades ago, a handful of university students got the bright idea to analyze some remains, the bodies of its victims. The rest of the community promptly shouted them down for desecrating the dead, but not before said students managed to determine that it had claws 30 centimeters long at minimum. You might think that the sound of someone crying in the dark would be out of place and warn us all off from going there. Actually, many students cry in the relative privacy of the stacks. A lot of Redacted here have breakdowns in general. I once saw a classmate sit down on these steps leading to the top floor of the Bodley, the other main library. We have over 100 libraries, all with sweetly vomit-inducing nicknames, and bawl her eyes out. A herd of tourists passed by, looking alternately bewildered and sympathetic. Meanwhile, the tour guide didn't even break his stride. So hearing crying in the stacks isn't necessarily a sign of alarm. What is alarming is your friends accidentally leaving you by yourself in the lower levels after sundown, in the darkness. You're probably thinking, what darkness? It's dark because someone decided that the cam needed motion-activated lights on its lower level. A supremely idiotic notion, given that the cam is a library. And as anyone with a modicum of common sense knows, students usually stay still while reading their books, and absorbing the requisite amount of information to regurgitate it back into their toots. Because I was completely alone, I had to jump up and down several times to bring the lights back on. I looked frantically up at the grated ceiling to see if I could spot any of my friends above me. The same brilliant mind that had dreamt up installing motion-activated lights in a library had also decided that the floors of Cam's lowest levels needed to be made out of metal grates. This meant that on an ordinary day, if you happened to be sitting at a table on a lower level, bits of mud from people's shoes dropped through the grates from the floor above and onto your head and books. Ominously, I couldn't see anyone above me either. At least the grates made sure my screams would echo beautifully through the above floors, warning off everyone else from this level. Milton's Paradise Lost just had to be shelved here, I thought bitterly, and I just had to write my 3,000-word paper tonight. The lights began to dim yet again, so to keep them on longer, I waved my arms wildly like someone on the airport tarmac waving down an airplane. And that was when I heard it. Somebody crying. Maybe I wasn't completely alone, or maybe it had noticed that I was, and fancied itself a mid-afternoon snack. I tucked Paradise Lost under my arm, collected the books that I had scattered across the table, and shouldered on my messenger bag, preparing to leave. Just because my friends had happened to abandon me didn't mean that I was an utter dolt. We roamed the lower levels in packs because we knew that it usually went after people wandering around by themselves. Did it truly expect that I would simply walk into the stacks, offering myself up like a dim-witted sacrificial lamb to the altar? The usual etiquette is to pretend that you don't notice anyone crying and or loudly losing their crap. But I'm not completely heartless. Yes, I didn't care enough to venture into the stacks, but I didn't want to leave anyone by themselves down here either. So on the off chance that it was an actual human being crying, not a monster trying to lure yet another victim to their doom, I said, "Is anyone else there?" No one responded. The sobbing simply grew louder. I edged toward the exit as I scanned my surroundings. I couldn't see anyone, or more to the point, anything, which didn't mean much because even when the lights stayed on, they were so dim that you couldn't see more than 5 feet away from yourself. Naturally, today was the one day that I had forgotten to bring my portable phone charger, so I had no handy flashlight to light my way. My dead phone sat heavily in my pocket, a useless lump of metal. Click, click. I heard a faint clicking noise, though the increasingly loud sobbing drilled into my ears and prevented me from pinpointing where it came from. I suddenly had a horrible image of something right behind me. Something monstrous inching ever closer, drooling and leering and capering in the dark with malicious glee. I whirled around. The space behind me was empty. 3 more clicks. I glimpsed a black shadow out of the corner of my eye. It swooped down into the darkness at the end of the room, too fast for me to make out any details. It was stalking me through the stacks, toying with me like a cat toyed with a mouse. Of course, right as I had this realization, the lights went out because I had been standing still for too long. The sobbing stopped abruptly. In the darkness, the clicking noise grew louder. 4 clicks. I ran with my arms out in front of me and sweat pouring down my forehead. I crashed painfully into the tables that I couldn't see, and bit down on my cries of pain because I didn't want to draw any more attention to myself if I could help it. Running brought the lights back on, and I saw the exit on my right. I veered towards that direction with my heart in my throat, my ears straining to hear any movement behind me. Just as my fingers touched the handle of the door, some great force lifted me and threw me like a rag doll against the closest bookshelf. I hit the shelf so hard that it toppled over and rained books down on me. Red rained down my forehead from a cut, and it dripped into my eyes. I wasted precious seconds just sitting there, in the middle of all those fallen books, too stunned to move. The sound of clicking from above finally made me look up. It clung to the grated ceiling with sharp claws, a vast mass of darkness that my eyes kept sliding off of, as though I gazed at something too horrible to look at for long. Disparate details jumped out at me. Claw-tipped, leathery wings straining against the ceiling, and a sharp, cruel mouth that curved into a mocking smile. I met half a dozen dark yellow eyes watching me, pupilless and scattered across all that darkness. They shone with malevolent intelligence and insane triumph. Those eyes told me that my death wouldn't be slow. It would pluck me from where I sat, and it would bring me back to its underground lair, to the mounds of rotting bodies stacked almost to the ceiling. It would savor my terror and my suffering for as long as possible. Oh, how lovely. I staggered up to my feet, hopelessly knowing there was no point. A sharp pain pierced my side and my vision kept doubling. I had nothing to use as a weapon and I couldn't outrun it. Yet as I glanced to my right, my breath caught in my throat. What it should have done earlier was throw me backwards, deeper into the stacks. Instead, its hunger had caused it to overlook an extremely vital fact. It had thrown me closer to the exit. I was now less than 7 meters away from salvation. Once again, I ran, this time knowing that if I was just fast enough, I could make it. I heard a sharp crack, the sound of it letting go of the ceiling so that it could chase me. 5 meters, 3 meters, 2, 1. I slammed the door open, ducking and rolling through just in time. Fiery pain erupted across my back as sharp claws dug in, seeking purchase in my flesh. I crawled free, moving on my hands and knees to the foot of the stairs. I used the railing to pull myself upright, and then adrenaline gave me the strength for a much-needed burst of speed, and I bolted up the stairs, leaving red footprints behind. As I continued to run, I heard it shriek below me in frustrated rage, the same shriek I'd heard countless times before. The volume of its cries made me clap both hands over my ears. Even then, both my nose and ears began to drip. Somehow, I kept going until I reached the lower reading room. I heard a loud babble of concerned voices and felt hands grabbing my arms. Purple spots danced before my eyes as I swayed on my feet and I knew that I was about to pass out. I only hoped that they would take me back to the Redacted, as far away from the library as possible. I dropped out of Redacted a few months ago. They were about to rusticate me anyways, given that I couldn't bring myself to step foot in either the Cam or the Bodley, both of which we were connected to each other by an underground passage, built to keep books safe from the constant rain. That wasn't much of a surprise. I had failed all of my exams. I didn't even care. I would do anything, go anywhere, just to forget the terror that I experienced while stumbling around in the dark, not knowing which way the exit was. Sometimes when I dreamed, I heard the sound of its claws as it hunted me. My parents welcomed me home without any questions or lectures, an unexpected gift. These days, I spend a lot of time thinking over and over again about how lucky I was. If it had thrown me even 3 feet further away from the exit, I wouldn't have made it out. It would have dug its claws into my unprotected back and ripped out my spinal cord in an ecstasy of hunger. But here's the thing. Luck doesn't last. It's proved before with Jennifer Carr that it can leave the cam if it wants to. I worry about coming home one night to see a patch of darkness moving against the sky. I worry about hearing its shrieks ringing through the air as it plunges down towards me, its sharp mouth aiming for my soft, vulnerable throat. I worry about meeting its dark yellow eyes and seeing that it still remembers me even after all this time. So I wrote this post to warn you. I don't know how long this post will stay up or if you'll even be able to understand which university I'm talking about. If the university administrators catch sight of this post, I suspect they will do what they have always done, which is sweep all information about it under the rug. I'm hardly the first student to have abruptly quit and attempted to tell others about what lives at Redacted. I most certainly won't be the last. Next year, yet more unknowing first years and visiting scholars will go to Redacted, only to find themselves in its maw. So if you're reading this, please know, should you find yourself in the Redacted Dreaming Spires, do make sure you avoid the lower levels of the cam. And if you can't help but go there, whatever you do, don't stay past sundown.